Inside that briefcase was a life I never imagined I'd have. At 68, I suddenly became richer than any wild dream I'd ever had. And today I thought I was going to change my daughter's entire world. Or at least that's what I believed. Welcome back to Dad's Real Life Revenge. I'm James. I'm 68 years old. For over 42 years, I made a living hauling 40-ton loads of steel across the darkest roads in North America. These hands are covered in calluses. My back aches whenever the weather turns. I'm used to counting every last coin just to fill up the tank, but today everything is different. Hit subscribe and drop a 9 in the comments for the $9 million you're about to hear about, and let's begin. I'm walking down the street toward Claire's house. It feels strange. I'm not driving my old truck. I'm wearing a worn-out hoodie from the 1990s, faded and frayed at the shoulders. I look like nothing more than a retired old man struggling to get by on a pension. But under my arm, the cream-colored briefcase feels heavy. Not because it's filled with bricks, but because it holds something enormous, $9 million. It's the inheritance from Raymond, my late brother. He spent his entire life deep in the northern mines. He never had children. And now all that money belongs to me, a worn-out old truck driver. I glance at my reflection in the window of a parked car. A hardened face. Tired eyes but burning with a plan. I wanted to give this to Claire. My daughter has struggled far too much. I wanted to see the look of shock in her eyes. I wanted to free her from the constant weight of making ends meet. I stop at her front door. My heartbeat is louder than a diesel engine. I'm about to knock. I'm about to pull her into a hug and tell her our lives are about to change. But then I hear voices from inside. The window is slightly open. Lucas, my son-in-law, is speaking. He's talking about me. Not with concern, not with care, not with love for his aging father-in-law. He calls me a burden, a weight on their little family. He talks about sending me away somewhere so their lives can be easier, less complicated. My steps freeze. A cold rush runs down my spine, colder than any blizzard I ever drove through in the Yukon. I tighten my grip on the handle of the briefcase. $9 million sits quietly inside, waiting to be given or waiting to become a weapon. I take a deep breath. The smell of asphalt mixes with the scent of money. I had imagined all of us stepping into a new chapter together, no more worrying about food, bills, survival. I had even included him in that future. I treated him like a son. But he has no idea what he just lost. The money is only part of it. The love I had for him was worth far more, and that love died the moment I heard those words come out of Lucas's mouth. I don't knock. Not yet. I stand there in silence, listening to every insult spilling from the man I was about to help. Each word is like a hammer, driving the final nail into what little patience I had left. I look at the cream-colored briefcase again. It's no longer a gift. It's a trap, and I'm the one setting the bait. After everything he said, even talking about putting me in a nursing home to take my valuable piece of land, Claire stayed silent. That silence hurt more than Lucas's words ever could. My daughter didn't object. She seemed to be considering it. She looked exhausted, tired of taking care of an old man she believed was broke. My chest tightened. I looked down at my hands, scarred from fixing engines and freezing nights from years spent away from home just to send money back so she could grow up, go to school, have a future. And this was what it all came to. Lucas began laying out his plan. First, he'd prepare a set of documents labeled as health insurance papers to trick me into signing. If I hadn't heard this with my own ears, I would have signed without a second thought. I loved that family. I never once imagined they would deceive me. But luck was on my side. I heard everything. Along with the words, I'm old, senile, outdated, dependent. So Lucas wanted my little bungalow. A few $100,000 from selling off my memories cheap. Fool. If he had waited just a little longer, he could have had an empire worth millions. I don't know if that's my luck or his misfortune. But in the end, people who don't love their family, who disrespect, who betray their own parents, they deserve exactly what's coming to them. I took a deep breath. The air tasted bitter with humiliation. I stepped back, then another step. I made sure my footsteps were silent. I turned toward my old truck, parked at the corner. The briefcase was still firm in my grip. I wasn't thinking about forgiveness anymore. I was thinking about a lesson for Lucas and for my daughter. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't cry. I would show him what a senile old man really looks like. I would become the burden he wanted me to be. I would let him tighten the noose around his own neck while believing he was winning. I climbed into the truck. The engine roared to life, rough and dry. I glanced at the house one last time through the rearview mirror. This war wouldn't be fought with fists. I would use the one thing Lucas believed: I didn't have patience. And $9 million to burn down everything he had built on lies and greed. Just wait. This revenge will unfold in a way he could never imagine. Because once this old truck driver shifts gears, he doesn't stop until his enemy is crushed beneath the wheels. I sat still inside the cabin of my old truck. The cramped space reeked of engine oil and stale cigarettes. My hands rested on the steering wheel, trembling. Not from fear, but from a cold rage. Colder than black ice on a midnight highway, the kind you never see, the kind that can send 40 tons of steel off a cliff in a single blink. I stared at the house through the windshield. The living room lights were still on. Lucas was still in there, laughing at the misery he had planned for me. He called me a burden. He wanted to toss me into a nursing home like a broken toy. His words kept replaying in my head like a misfiring engine, dry, jarring, painful. I glanced at the passenger seat. The cream-colored briefcase sat there. All I had to do was walk in and open it. Lucas would drop to his knees. He'd kiss my boots, beg for forgiveness, beg for a scrap of that money. But no, that would be too easy. A man like Lucas doesn't deserve a quick ending. I took a deep breath. The air inside the cabin felt heavy. I thought back to those long overnight hauls, the times I kept control when the truck started sliding down a steep grade. Rule number 1, never panic. Rule number 2, turn your weakness into your opponent's trap. Lucas thinks I'm a senile old man, a washed-up trucker with a gut and an empty head. Fine. I'll give him exactly what he wants to see. He wants a weak old sheep, I'll wear the wool. But beneath it is a wolf that's crossed thousands of miles of storm and steel. I felt something shift inside me. The pain of betrayal faded, replaced by cold calculation. I wouldn't just take back what's mine, I'd take everything he values. I'd tear down his pride, crush his arrogance, watch him fall to the bottom with nothing to hold on to. I reached for my old phone. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. I needed an ally. Someone who could see through the numbers Lucas thought he had buried. I started the engine. It roared to life like a declaration of war. I backed out of the street and drove off without looking back. Night began to fall. The city lights flickered on. But in my mind, there was only one target. A plan had already taken shape, precise and dangerous, like moving explosives through a dark tunnel. Lucas thinks he's the hunter. He has no idea he's already in the sights of a veteran driver. I'll let him enjoy his victory a little longer. I'll let him sign the deals he thinks are wins. What he doesn't know is that every signature is another brick in the prison he's building for himself. This revenge isn't just for me. It's for 42 years of sweat on the open road. And it starts with one phone call. The call that will uncover the darkest secrets of my dear son-in-law. Are you ready to see what happens when a predator becomes the prey? The next 3 weeks were the finest performance of my life. Even a top Hollywood actor couldn't have played a senile old man better than I did. I started wearing my oldest, most worn-out sweaters. I let my beard grow scruffy. I put on a confused look like the world was moving too fast for me to keep up. Every morning I went to Claire and Lucas's house. I didn't bring the cream-colored briefcase anymore. I hid it carefully beneath the floor of my truck. Instead, I carried a plastic bag with a few cheap cereal boxes. I pretended my hands were shaking when I poured coffee. I let milk spill onto the table. I wanted Lucas to see a man falling apart, a real burden. And Lucas swallowed the bait. He started looking at me with that condescending expression. He didn't even bother hiding the contempt in his eyes anymore. Every time I asked how to use the TV remote or how to search on Google, he would sigh. He looked at me like a worn-out tire, something ready to be thrown away. "Lucas, what does this green button do?" I asked, in a weak, trembling voice, fumbling with his tablet. He snatched it out of my hands, growling at me not to touch things I didn't understand. What he didn't know was that when he turned his back, I had already watched how he entered his passcode. I remembered every movement. I started complaining about the price of milk going up. I muttered about my pension not being enough to cover medication. I wanted him to believe I was broke. I wanted him to believe that little bungalow was the last thing I had. And he believed it. He began pushing Claire, talking about protecting my future by managing my assets for me. He used polished words like safety and healthcare. But I knew what he really wanted. The deed. He started inviting me to staged family dinners. He would serve me food with the face of a saint playing the devoted son-in-law in front of Claire. But under the table he kicked my leg whenever I accidentally mentioned old memories. He wanted me silent. He wanted me to fade away into forgetfulness. I looked at Lucas. He looked so confident, like a wolf grinning at an old sheep. What he didn't know, this sheep was recording everything. Every time I pretended to fall asleep on the sofa, I was listening to his secret phone calls. He was drowning in debt, playing a dangerous financial game, and he thought I was his escape card. The contrast was almost laughable. On one side, a man in a polished suit wearing an expensive watch but rotten inside. On the other, an old man in a faded hoodie holding enough wealth to buy his entire company outright. I felt a strange satisfaction, like keeping perfect control on a dangerous mountain road, while the driver behind you speeds blindly into a deadly curve. But I wasn't just waiting. While playing the senile old man, I was moving my pieces. I reached out to someone Lucas would never expect, someone who could dig through every hidden corner of his bank accounts, someone who would strip away his polished mask. He thought I was a vein of ore to be mined. He was wrong. I'm the explosive. That night, I sat in the truck cabin again. I opened the cream-colored briefcase. Streetlight spilled in illuminating the checks and inheritance documents. $9 million. Then I flipped to another file. Everything I had gathered on Lucas over the past 3 weeks. Numbers don't lie. And what I found in his email was far worse than him trying to steal my house. A secret big enough to send him to prison immediately. Do you want to know what Lucas really did with Claire's money? Because this ride is about to hit its most dangerous turn. The next morning, I drove my old truck into downtown Toronto. I didn't stop at any cheap parking lots. I headed straight for a towering glass skyscraper, the headquarters of some of the most powerful law firms in the city. In my worn-out hoodie and faded jeans, I looked like a man completely out of place among a sea of sharp suits. The security guard eyed me with suspicion, but the moment I pulled out Raymond's business card, his attitude shifted instantly. I stepped into Amelia's office. She was a razor-sharp financial attorney with a fearsome reputation. She looked at me then, at the cream-colored briefcase I placed on the oak desk. She didn't judge me by my clothes. Amelia was a professional. She knew that real money rarely shows itself. I opened the briefcase. I didn't say much. I pushed the stack of documents, $9 million in inheritance, toward her. I need you to look into someone, I said, my voice rough from years of breathing road dust. I handed her Lucas's name along with the account details I had secretly gathered. I don't want a simple civil case. I want a full forensic accounting investigation. I want to know every single dollar he's spent over the past 2 years. Amelia raised an eyebrow. She began flipping through the papers, her eyes cold and focused like a hawk locking onto prey. She said this wouldn't be cheap. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a thick stack of cash. I set it on the desk. Here's the retainer. Do whatever it takes. Leave no trace. While Amelia worked, I sat silently by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city. The cars below moved like tiny toys in a rush. Somewhere in those buildings, Lucas was probably sitting in an air-conditioned office sipping expensive coffee, thinking about how to trick this old man into signing a power of attorney. He thought he was in control. He had no idea a net was being cast around him. 3 days later, Amelia called me back. Her expression was more serious than before. She pushed a thick file across the desk. Lucas wasn't just drowning in debt. He was a professional fraudster. He had been running transactions that would make even seasoned financial criminals uneasy. I looked at the numbers, money flowing through a maze of shell accounts, massive losses in cryptocurrency. Then my eyes stopped on a highlighted page. My breath caught. That wasn't his money, and it wasn't from my house. Those transactions were tied to Claire, my daughter. Lucas hadn't just betrayed me. He had done something unforgivable to his own wife. He had turned Claire into a pawn in his reckless gamble. A tremor ran down my spine. This time it wasn't anger. It was disgust. Amelia looked at me and asked what I wanted to do next. I clenched my fists. I could feel the weight of 42 years on the road pressing into these hands. I couldn't let Claire be dragged into the abyss with him. But I also couldn't reveal my plan too soon. I stood up, picked up the cream-colored briefcase, thanked Amelia, and walked out. My plan had just gained a new chapter, a darker one. Lucas thought he was hunting down a senile old man to take a small house. He had no idea he had just stepped on a landmine. If you've made it this far, do us a quick favor, hit subscribe. A lot of people watch without doing it, and it costs you nothing, but it means everything to us. Can you guess what Lucas did using Claire's name? The truth is far worse than a simple scam. And I, James, will make him pay for every forged signature. I returned to Amelia's office. The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the wall clock. She slid a thick file toward me and looked at me with sympathy. A look I didn't want. James, she said softly, this is much worse than we thought. I looked down at the numbers transaction records laid out in black and white. Lucas had lost over $200,000 on worthless crypto platforms. But that wasn't the worst part. He had secretly taken out a second mortgage on the house he shared with Claire. He had forged her signature. He had turned my daughter into a debtor, without her even knowing. My chest tightened. It felt like a 40-ton engine block was crushing my heart. My Claire. She had always been proud of her independence. She loved him, trusted him blindly. And that man used her trust as fuel for his greed. He wasn't just a bad man. He was a parasite, draining her day by day. Amelia revealed even more. Lucas had used Claire's personal information to open multiple credit lines in her name. The total debt had reached a level that would take her a lifetime to repay, without intervention. I stood up and walked to the window. Toronto moved on below fast and indifferent. But in my eyes everything had turned gray. And then it hit me. I was wrong. I thought Claire was part of Lucas's plan. I was angry at her silence. But now I understood. Claire wasn't the enemy. She was a hostage in her own marriage. A cold resolve settled over me. This was no longer about money. This was a rescue. I had to pull my daughter out of the wreckage Lucas created, but I had to do it the right way. If I simply gave her money, Lucas would burn through it again. No, I had to cut this cancer out, at the root. I turned back to Amelia and spoke in a firm, unshakable voice. I wanted every piece of evidence prepared, every forged signature, every fraudulent transaction. I wanted it all laid out on the lawyer's table by tomorrow. She nodded. She understood. The old tiger was awake. I stepped out of the building. The cold wind hit my face, but I didn't feel it. My blood was moving too fast for that. I drove straight to Claire's house. Lucas was standing in the front yard talking on the phone, a cigar in his other hand. He looked relaxed, confident. He still believed he was the smartest man in the room. He waved at me with that familiar fake smile. "You're back, Dad," I smiled back. The smile of a senile old man, but behind my eyes was a deadly mountain road. I was shifting gears. I was preparing for the final impact. I walked inside and saw Claire sitting in the kitchen. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. I wanted to hold her. I wanted to tell her I'm here. I've got this. But I held back. The act had to continue, just a little longer. That night, I lay in the small room at my daughter's house. I listened to Lucas laughing in the next room, celebrating, thinking he was about to take my bungalow. He had no idea. By tomorrow, his life would collapse like a sandcastle in a storm. Do you know what it feels like when a con man realizes he picked the wrong target? The worst truth about Lucas was still sitting inside that cream-colored briefcase, and Judgment Day was coming. The next morning, I invited Lucas to lunch. I chose one of the most expensive steakhouses in the city. He was surprised, but then he smirked. He thought the old man wanted one last good meal before being sent off to a nursing home. I wore my dusty old hoodie again, stained with years on the road. I even limped slightly on purpose. I wanted him to see a man falling apart. Lucas arrived 15 minutes late. Tailored suit, an Omega watch worth $9,000 on his wrist, a shiny toy bought with my daughter's tears, and debt. He sat down across from me. No concern. No small talk. He placed a stack of documents on the table. "Dad, we need to settle this once and for all," he said, his tone dripping with superiority. He slid the power of attorney toward me. "Just sign here. Claire and I will take care of everything. We'll find you a good place to stay. You're not in any shape to handle that house anymore." He looked at me like outdated inventory. Something to be cleared out. I picked up the paper, letting my hands tremble just like the script demanded. I stared at the lines, then back at him. "I just don't want Claire to be upset," I whispered, letting a hint of tears form in the corner of my eyes. Lucas didn't feel sympathy, only impatience. He leaned forward, urging me to sign quickly so he wouldn't be late for work. I set the document down and ordered food. I chose the most expensive steak on the menu. Lucas frowned. He was probably calculating how much of my pension this meal would cost. But then he shrugged it off. He figured the house would be his soon anyway. Throughout the meal, I complained about my back pain. I talked about those endless winter hauls. I played the role of a man worn down in both body and mind. Lucas grinned with satisfaction. He started bragging about his grand crypto ventures, how he'd be a millionaire any day now. I nodded eagerly like a child listening to a fairy tale. When the bill came, I fumbled through my pockets, pretending I couldn't find my wallet. I dropped a few coins onto the floor. Lucas sighed in irritation and pulled out his black credit card to pay. He had no idea that card was opened using Claire's identity. He was spending borrowed money to maintain his illusion. I watched him sign the receipt. His hand was steady, confident. But I had already seen the cracks. I had seen the fear hiding beneath that polished surface, the fear of a man about to be crushed by debt. I smiled, a quiet smile he mistook for submission. "All right, Lucas," I said as we stood up. "This afternoon we'll go to your lawyer's office. I'll sign everything." His eyes lit up. He immediately pulled out his phone and called his lawyer to prepare the meeting. He thought he had finally landed the big fish. I stepped out of the restaurant. The midday sun hit my eyes. I looked at Lucas's shiny Audi parked by the curb, then at my old truck in the distance. One was built on lies, the other on truth. The real battle would begin in 2 hours. I had prepared 2 briefcases. The cream one held the future. The yellow one held hell. Lucas thought this afternoon would change his life. He was right, just not the way he imagined. As we got into the car to head to the law office, I saw Lucas texting someone. "It's done." The old man took the bait. I simply fastened my seatbelt. I could feel the silence before the storm. Do you know what happens when a con man walks into a lawyer's office and finds the police already waiting? The door to the truth was about to open, and it would grind Lucas into dust. Lucas's lawyer's office was on the 22nd floor. The place reeked of money and pretense. Lucas walked in like a king about to be crowned. He tossed his briefcase onto the table and gestured for me to sit. His lawyer was already there, a thick stack of documents, ready, full asset power of attorney. "Just sign where the X marks are." "Dad," Lucas said, his voice trembling with excitement. He handed me a gold-plated pen. I took it. My hands shook violently on cue. I glanced at Claire sitting beside me. My daughter kept her head down. She looked like a ghost of herself. My chest tightened again, but I knew I had to stay cold to end this nightmare. I lowered the pen to the paper. Lucas held his breath. He leaned in closer, eyes locked on every movement. One signature, that's all it would take. My house would be his. His debts would have a lifeline. He thought he had already won. But the moment the pen touched the page, I stopped. I looked up straight into his eyes. The confused old man in the worn hoodie was gone. My gaze was sharp now, like a trucker, staring down a hijacker on a dark highway. "Lucas, are you sure you want me to sign this?" I asked, my voice low and steady. He froze. The smile vanished from his face. He tried to recover. "What are you talking about? Just sign it so we can go," he snapped, irritation creeping in. Greed had made him careless. Right then, the meeting room door swung open. Not a secretary with tea. Amelia walked in, followed by 2 older men in black suits. One was a forensic accountant, the other, an inspector from the Economic Crimes Unit. Lucas's face drained of color. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, turning to his lawyer, who looked just as pale. Amelia stepped forward and placed a yellow briefcase on the table right next to Lucas's documents. "This contains evidence of forged signatures, financial fraud, and money laundering through shell accounts," she said clearly. I set the pen down and stood up. No limp, no trembling. I stood tall, solid, unshaken. I looked at Lucas the way a driver looks at debris on the highway. "You really thought I was just a stupid old trucker," I said. "I've driven millions of miles. I've seen every kind of scammer there is. But you made one fatal mistake." I leaned in slightly. "You went after my daughter." Claire lifted her head. She looked at me, then at the documents on the table. Tears began to fall. Lucas lunged toward the yellow briefcase, but the inspector stepped in and stopped him. Everything unraveled in seconds. His confidence shattered. Lucas stammered, unable to form words. He stared at the open briefcase, at the copies of forged signatures, the transaction records, the hidden accounts. But that wasn't all. There was still another briefcase. The one he had been dreaming about. The cream-colored one. Do you want to know what's really inside it? And what could drive Lucas to his knees? In absolute despair. Because the real revenge has only just begun. Lucas stood there like a tree struck by lightning. His face twisted. Arrogance gone, replaced by pure terror. He stared at the yellow briefcase, every crime laid bare. Financial reports. Hidden transaction photos. Forged signatures in Claire's name. Clear as day. I slowly stepped to the center of the conference room. I placed my worn cream-colored briefcase on the table. 2 briefcases sat side by side. One held his hell. The other, the future he could have had. Lucas, I said, my voice cold as steel. Look at these 2 cases. One could have saved your life. The other will end it. The funny thing is, you chose the second one 3 weeks ago. I opened the cream-colored briefcase. Checks. Inheritance documents. $9 million laid bare under the office lights. Claire gasped. She couldn't believe her eyes. Lucas stared at the numbers, his eyes burning with regret and madness. 9 million, he whispered. He lunged toward me, but the officer grabbed his shoulder and held him back. That money belonged to my brother, I said. I was going to use it to pay off your debts. I was going to buy Claire a new home. I was even going to let you manage this investment fund if you had proven yourself to be a good husband. I took a step closer. But you saw me as something to exploit. You saw my daughter as nothing more than a financial tool. He snapped. He started shouting, accusing me of deceiving him, calling me a cruel old man. Then he dropped to his knees, begging, pleading with Claire to forgive him, promising to change, promising to start over. But Claire stood up, and the look in her eyes was pure disgust. She stepped back behind me. She finally saw him for what he truly was. The inspector stepped forward and read the arrest warrant. Lucas was handcuffed on the spot. His downfall came fast like a tire blowout on the highway. Everything was gone. His fake empire exposed. His family shattered. His freedom over. I stood there watching them escort him down the glass hallway. He kept mumbling about the $9 million, still mourning the fortune he lost, not the wife he betrayed. A greedy man stays greedy. I turned and pulled Claire into my arms. She broke down, sobbing against my chest. I'm sorry you had to see this, I whispered, but sometimes you have to burn down a dead forest for something new to grow. This revenge gave me a strange kind of satisfaction. Not like winning a bet. More like delivering a dangerous load safely to its destination. I looked out the window. The Toronto sky was still clear and blue. Lucas was gone from our lives. But this story wasn't over. He was removed. But the wreckage he left behind still remained. The debts in Claire's name, the mortgage papers. I looked at the cream-colored briefcase again. Now, the $9 million would finally serve its true purpose. But could money really heal what had been broken inside my daughter? And what comes next, for a millionaire truck driver? Because in the final chapter, I'm going to reveal one more truth I've kept hidden all along. A secret in Raymond's will that could change Claire's future forever. Let's take this ride to the very last mile. We left the glass building as the sun began to set. The city lights flickered on one by one. Claire sat quietly in my truck. She didn't say a word. She stared out the window, her eyes still red, but the fear was gone. I started the engine. The familiar diesel rumble filled the cabin. Don't worry about the debts, Claire, I said, taking her trembling hand. I used the cream-colored briefcase to clean up everything Lucas left behind. The mortgages are cleared. The credit lines are canceled. You're free now. I drove her across the city to a quiet neighborhood. I stopped in front of a small house with lavender flowers blooming in the yard. This is yours. I placed a new key in her hand. No debt. No lies. This is where you start over and chase your dream of writing. Claire looked at me and broke down again. But this time, they were tears of relief. She finally understood. Family isn't something to be mined. It's something that protects you from the storm. Raymond's $9 million had finally been used the right way. It wasn't just money. It was a lifeline. I watched my daughter step into her new home. A new chapter had begun. As for me, I'd return to the road. I didn't need fancy suits or polished offices. I'm still James, an old truck driver in a worn hoodie drinking cheap coffee. He got the lesson he deserved. Money is just paper. Family is the real treasure. I shifted gears. The truck rolled forward onto the open highway. Ahead of me stretched an endless road, and I had just delivered the most important load of my life. In the end, money is only something you hold in your hands. Family is the only treasure that truly matters. You've just reached the end of this story with Dad's real-life revenge. If you think this ending was worth it, hit like and share it. Help spread the lesson about loyalty, family, and justice. Don't forget to subscribe and join our community for more powerful real-life stories. But here's the thing. When I reopened Raymond's will tonight, I found something unexpected. A final clause. One I've never told anyone about. It mentioned a piece of land up north, and it seems Lucas wasn't the only one watching my family. This journey isn't over yet. Do you want to know who's been waiting in the shadows? I'll see you in the next story.